How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 5 of What If Deku Had White Flames. And before I start this What If off, I'd like to tell you all that I'm going to be watching different animes so that I can make different anime What Ifs. Now, that doesn't mean My Hero Academia What Ifs are going to be like every other day or every couple days. I'm most likely going to upload 2 anime What Ifs every single day. One My Hero Academia What If, and another these other anime that I'm watching What If, so that you guys will just have generally more content. And it is very close to the weekend, and please comment your What If suggestions down in the comment section below. I did put up a community post as I need to make another new What If for the weekend. It's a new What If weekend, basically. So I'm going to be uploading new What Ifs every single weekend. That's pretty much what I did at the start of my YouTube channel, and then it just got phased out. And now I'm going to phase it back in, uploading a new What If every single weekend. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and now let's begin. Izuku, along with many of his other classmates, would be sitting in the Class 1A waiting room. This is where they would find out what people they would be versing in the first round. Izuku would also find out that he was the first match up, and that he was going to be versing some random kid named Shinso from Class 1C. As he was about to leave to go onto the arena, his classmates would wish him good luck. All of his classmates except Todoroki, as Izuku would then step out onto the field of grass, as he would then walk up onto just this not tiny, but like a medium-sized arena that was a square. As Midnight would then read off the rules. If you step on the grass, that counts as out and you have lost the match. Or you can get KO'd and lose the match, or you can tell one of us, like Midnight or another ref, that you have decided to tap out of the match and that the other person has won. So now, let's begin the first match. As Izuku would look over to Shinso, who would start to just talk and start trash talking towards Izuku a lot. However, Izuku wouldn't say anything, as he would just continue walking to Shinso. Sure, Izuku loved to trash talk, but he wasn't one to make it go to his head. That is just a silly decision, as if you let someone's choices or choice of words go to your head, that can end up consuming your brain and mind, so that you stop focusing. And Izuku had learned you must always keep your focus on, and you must always be on like high gear. You cannot just lose focus. So like, say for example, you might get sneak attacked, but if you were focused and you were all just ready, you would be able to stop that sneak attack from happening. And that's something Endeavor had taught Izuku and Todoroki. So Izuku would end up walking to Shinso and would very easily take Shinso out by punching him and then pushing him while he was in the air, as Shinso, trying to catch himself, would touch the grass, meaning that he had left the arena. So Izuku would be declared the winner of the first match, as all of the rest of the round 1 matches would then go, as Izuku would then be put up against Uraraka, as Izuku and Uraraka would step up, wishing each other good luck as the match would begin. Izuku would get into a stance, and so would Uraraka, as she would then rush Izuku, as Izuku would dodge this and would then punch her in the back, causing her to stumble over but barely catching herself so that she didn't fall out of the arena, as she would then rush Izuku again, as Izuku would dodge this rush and would punch her in the back again, as she would then rush Izuku for a third time and would then toss up her jacket, much like she did against Bakugo in the actual anime, as Izuku, seeing this, would then punch it while also realizing that it wasn't her, as Izuku would then jump up, which would cause him to dodge Uraraka's attack, which would be a takedown attack, trying to wrap her arms around him so that she could take him down and possibly push him out of the arena. And since he dodged this, she would end up stumbling over, falling, as Izuku would then grab her leg, picking her up and tossing her out of the arena, as she would then be declared as a ring-out loss, as Izuku would be declared the winner of the second match that he had faced, as he would then move on to the semi-finals, As in next match would end up being Bakugo versus Ida, which this would decide who would go to the semifinals against Izuku. As Bakugo would start up in a stance against Ida as the match would then begin. Ida would start to run circles around Bakugo, hoping to put Bakugo in a daze while also using his speed quirk to hopefully easily maneuver around Bakugo and get a couple of good attacks in, which could possibly easily give him the win. However, Bakugo wouldn't allow something like this to happen, so he would then start to just make explosions all around him, as he would just continue exploding in certain areas until he had finally hit Ida in the leg, as this would cause Ida to trip over, as Bakugo would then grab Ida's neck and would look over towards the ref, as Bakugo was holding Ida down, who was trying to get up but couldn't, as Ida would then, sadly not wanting to give up but had to, since he really couldn't do anything from the position he was in, as Bakugo would then be declared on to the semi-finals against Izuku, and whoever won that would end up going on to the finals against another person who wins the semifinals of the other tournament bracket that they were doing. So Izuku, well, not another tournament bracket, but the other half bracket. There was one half bracket, another half. It's just like a tournament, basically. So Izuku and Bakugo would then step up onto the arena, wish each other good luck. Remember, they have respect for each other, and this respect/rivalry would end up causing Bakugo's personality to shift. He wasn't so much as cocky anymore, but he was starting to shift into more of a friendly, but still somewhat cocky type of person. So when the match would begin, Bakugo and Izuku would stay in a stance, not rushing each other at all, waiting for the other's first move, as Bakugo would then take this first move, launching himself towards Izuku, propelling himself forward using his explosions, as Izuku would barely dodge this, as he would then reveal his white flames. He hadn't had to use it at all during the tournament yet, and now he has revealed it, as Bakugo would then launch himself towards Izuku again. However, Izuku would dodge this again, as finally one of his forms would then finally form. It took a tiny bit of time for it to accumulate. This, of course, would be his white claws, and just white claws on his hands and feet, a new form that he had learned while training for the sports festival. So Izuku would gain a ton of speed with these claws on, running on all fours around Bakugo, as Izuku was basically touching in his primal instinct, basically, as he was acting like a sort of dog or cat, running at very high speeds. However, this was much like Bakugo's fight against Ida. However, when Bakugo would send an explosion, Izuku would run and jump towards it, however flipping over it, causing a distraction, which would make Bakugo confused on why Izuku had done this. As while Izuku was doing this, he would also make some of his white flames collide with the explosion, causing it to collide with it and then explode, creating a massive cloud of just smoke, which would mask Izuku's presence as he would appear from right behind Bakugo, putting him into a chokehold. Not wanting this to be the end, Bakugo would flip himself around, smashing Izuku's back into the ground, as Izuku would then start to roll around with very high speeds, as he would then grab Bakugo's side of the head and smash his head every time it would come close to the ground, as Bakugo would then end up getting knocked out, as Izuku would then be sent on to the finals against his brother, Todoroki, as they would be given a 20-minute break before the finals would begin, as Izuku was forced to contemplate on what his game plan should be, as Bakugo would walk up to Izuku in the waiting room and would congratulate Izuku on the win, and that he's going to have to train a lot harder if he wishes to beat him. Izuku would agree with Bakugo, while also not saying that it was impossible for Bakugo to beat him. As Izuku would be sitting there, Todoroki would walk up to Izuku as well and would tell Izuku that he's going to lose by a landslide before walking away again, as Izuku would finally hear that the 20 minutes had ended and for both the Class 1A students to walk up onto just the arena, so Izuku and Todoroki would, as Izuku would wish Todoroki good luck. However, Todoroki would not do the same, as Izuku would get into a stance, as Todoroki would stand there silently, as Todoroki would then immediately jump at Izuku as soon as the match began, as Izuku would easily dodge this, as Todoroki didn't really jump at Izuku with much speed at all. Todoroki would then create an ice blade on his ice side and a fire blade on the other, basically using them like knives, as Izuku would send a massive wave of white flames at Todoroki, as Todoroki would slice it in half using his ice, before remaking the ice, like, jagged, pointy thing on his arm, or his ice blade. Man, I've been fumbling a lot, I guess. But Izuku would continue sending these white flames at Todoroki, who would just cut them in half with his ice blade, which would end up melting it completely, while also burning Todoroki a little bit, but the ice would help with the pain. As Izuku would then jump back, sending a massive wave of white flames right at Todoroki, who would end up using this just like Izuku had used the smoke, which he would then appear right next to Izuku, slashing at his arm with his fire blade and the other arm with his ice blade, cutting Izuku, causing blood to just come out of those two cuts. They weren't very deep cuts, but they weren't very shallow either, as Izuku would then fall to the ground in complete shock by this, as Todoroki would then put his ice blade right through Izuku's chest, narrowly missing all of Izuku's organs, as the only problem with this, or the only problem with the now cut, was there is a hole through Izuku's body that you could see through, and that it's just bleeding. As Izuku, now on the ground, barely holding himself up, would see Todoroki bring his fire blade above his head, bringing it down to point right at Izuku's nose, right in between his eyes. "I've finally beaten you after all these years," Todoroki would say, "and finally I have the chance to kill you." Izuku would look on in shock before laughing. "So, this is what you've been trying to do all these years. You weren't trying to beat me in a battle. You were trying to kill me. But you've just been too weak to do it." As Izuku would then spring up, halting any of the heroes from coming towards the arena, as Izuku would then create a massive white flame dome over the little square arena, as he would then say this: "No interactions, no disruptions, one-on-one, sudden death. Here we are, Todoroki, the final battle between brothers. It's life or death. Now let's do this," Izuku would say, while also buying time for him to take off his jacket and to wrap it around his chest so that he could stop some of the bleeding, as Todoroki would launch himself towards Izuku, propelling his fire blade straight to where Izuku's head was, as Izuku was able to dodge this, as Izuku would then form into his primal form, which was with the white flame claws, as Izuku would run towards Todoroki, slashing at him, which would cause Todoroki to end up having multiple cut wounds right down his torso, as Izuku would continue doing this, but Todoroki didn't seem fazed at all, before jumping right at Izuku, punching him across the face, as Izuku would finally notice what was happening with Todoroki. His hair was slowly turning black from the white side and from the red side. It was as if it was looking like it was corrupting, as Izuku would then jump back, as he would finally realize what was happening. His white side was turning black, while his red side was turning purplish. I made a mistake calling it turning black. I mean, Izuku couldn't really see that far, but he could tell that the white was turning black and just made the assumption, before realizing that his hair was turning purple and black, as if he was corrupted or something similar to that. Todoroki would jump towards the already injured Izuku and would send a flurry of punches right into his chest before kicking him backwards, as Izuku would slam into the ground with his head going first, causing him to end up going unconscious, but before he did, he would say, "Is this really it? Is this how I'm going to die?" as Izuku's eyes would then shut as he was completely unconscious, as this would cause the dome of white flames to disperse, revealing to the crowd all of the blood on the white arena, as Todoroki would be walking towards Izuku with his flame blade in hand, as if he was about to end the life of Izuku. However, before this could happen, Izuku would spring up as his eyes had turned completely soulless. They were completely white, as white flames would start to emit from Izuku's eyes, this exact same form that he went to when he was 7. In a moment of desperation, Izuku had gone into his full power mode. His body had done this so that Izuku wouldn't die by the hands of his brother. And now he was acting completely mindless, as he was in this mindless form with his body's only goal of surviving and hopefully killing all of the threats around him. As Izuku would go right towards Todoroki, sending his claw right through him, his newer form had combined with his primal form into an ultimate primal form. That's what I'm going to be calling it. Not the best name, but not the worst either. As Izuku, launching himself towards Todoroki, would cut X's, basically one side, or his right hand going down to the left, his left hand going down to the right, making an X shape of just a cut going right down at Todoroki's chest, as Todoroki would jump back in severe pain from this. The cuts were severely deep, as Izuku would rush towards Todoroki again, punching him across the face, which would cause Todoroki to then meet another punch to the face, before Izuku would slam Todoroki into the ground, and then would stomp on his back. However, before anything else could happen, Izuku would end up jumping back, performing or about to perform, as he was charging up an ultimate attack that would end Todoroki there. It was a massive fireball that would end up being in one hand, as Izuku would launch it towards Todoroki, but this would never end up happening, as it would end up being deflected by a new person in the arena, as Izuku would look on to this mysterious woman who was standing in between him and Todoroki. As Izuku would then go out of this ultimate primal form, as Izuku would look closer at who this woman was. It was someone with completely black hair, but this woman looked familiar. He had never seen her before, as she had black hair, and he knew no people with black hair that were as old as this one was. The only people he really knew were his friends that were his age. However, when he looked closer, he realized this woman was his mother, as he would look on in complete shock, as tears would end up coming right down his face. He had not seen his mother in 5 years, ever since she was killed. At least that's what his father had told him, as it was all over the news. The mother of the Todoroki twins was killed in a battle against a villain. She was no hero. She was supposedly trying to be taken for ransom money, but was end up killed by this person, and her body was end up dumped into a river. But Izuku was confused. Here his mother was standing right in front of him. He had no clue how his mother could be right there, as his mother would then turn around, grabbing Todoroki, and would then jump through a portal standing behind him. As Izuku would take a couple steps towards where his mother was standing, dropping to his knees before collapsing, just crying. His mother was right there, someone who was deeply close to, but was now siding with the villain Todoroki, someone who had tried to kill him for no reason, all just because Izuku had beaten him when he was 7? This made no sense to him. And that's something Izuku just couldn't understand, and that's because he didn't know the interaction his mother had, as this would end up having to make a flashback that I will now do. So 5 years prior to this incident, Izuku's mother is walking down the street getting groceries for Endeavor. She still did chores while also going to a mental hospital every other day to get a checkup. She had gotten released a year prior, as she would end up being walking to go get groceries. However, she would end up being pushed into an alleyway, as this person would end up making her go through a portal after pushing her, as she would then reveal to be in not an alleyway, a warehouse, as she would look around to see All For One standing in a chair, or sitting in a chair, as All For One would then look down at Izuku's mother, saying how she was his daughter and that she needs to fulfill her destiny as the daughter to All For One, as he would place his hand on her, just basically unlocking the lock that was around her true quirk, this being All For One. All For One had a daughter who had the All For One quirk, but in fear of her being killed, he had locked it away so that this could never end up coming out, or the truth would never end up coming out. Remnants of this quirk still remain in Todoroki and Izuku, but they are also locked. So when he unlocked this, Rei's hair, I believe, Todoroki and Izuku's mother's name is Rei. I'm going to be referring to her as Rei. If not, just correct me in the comments. So Rei's hair would immediately turn jet black, corrupting basically as if signaling that she had switched sides, much like how Todoroki's hair changed into black and purple from white and red. And that's where I'm going to leave this off, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy part 5 of What If Deku Had White Flames. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.